Folks, what's going on? And welcome back to the grassy flatlands of Nemedicina in Rome 2. And yes, I have you a battle courtesy of our wonderful friend Sol Invictus with the game's namesake. Yes, Rome is here, folks. And we're going to see how they stack up in this one. They are facing off against the Suebi, so will they find victory, or will this be a give me back my legions moment for the Romans? Let's take a look here. There are some veteran legionaries. Now, veteran legionaries, I think, are kind of like discount Evocati cohort. They come with really high attack, but they cost a little less. We've got Vigiles up front, which are obviously just there to break charges, absorb javelins, and to hold back cavalry. And then we got some Principes, which again, I'm assuming this was a pick based on cost effectiveness, because the Principe are cheap, and they're still a pretty solid heavy infantry. You can see their stats here. Roman infantry doesn't hit as much damage as the barbarian infantry, and they don't hit as hard on the charge, but they deliver a punishing pila volley, and they also have excellent armor and morale compared to most other factions. So basically the Romans are better in a grind, and the barbarians are better on the charge. So you get the Romans into a grind fight, and you're in trouble. Like, you never want to be in a grind fight with the Romans, and I'm assuming that the Vigiles might potentially be there for that reason too, like I said, to absorb charges. Now, as far as cavalry goes, we've got some Equites. There's some War Dogs as well. Now, War Dogs can be very good if they get the right targeting against an enemy skirmisher. And then you can use the dog handlers to break up charges and stuff later on as well. There's 2 of those war dogs. And then there's a couple of auxiliary cavalry. I say a couple, there's 3. 2 Equites, 3 of those, and then a general and bodyguard. Let's take a look at the Suebi army and understand what general abilities he's up against. Looks like Pride and Fast Charge. So Fast Charge, remember, comes in 3 phases, which ultimately leads to absolutely brutal charge damage. We got Bloodsworn and Spear Levy right here in the middle with a Noble Rider General. There's a couple of Germanic Scout Riders behind that. And then much in Suebi fashion, there's a couple of wings here of the army. A couple Spear Levy here, Cimbri Bowwomen, and Bloodsworn and Wolf Warriors. Remember, Wolf Warriors add the scare effect. A Noble Rider supporting. Same thing on this flank. It looks like it is going to be symmetric on both flanks. So the Suebi here have speed, they've got charge. They are far, far outclassed on armor and in terms of like survivability. But if they get their charges off proper and are able to rip a gaping hole into the Roman forces, they can do quite well. They have the skirmishing advantage because the Cimbri Bowwomen versus nothing for the Romans. So the Romans have to push, and that's where we're seeing them push right now. You can see in this Equite unit getting extremely aggressive on the Germanic Scout Riders and the Wodenaz Spear. That's a Wodenaz Spear. I missed that earlier. Holy crap. Yeah, that's a tough unit. It's got cavalry counter tactics that's going to pop there as well. But I like this catch here. Vigiles are a cheap unit. Good way to pin down the Wodenaz and maybe even cause a couple casualties to them with the rear charge here while they were trying to walk away from that cav fight. But the Equites got slaughtered. The dogs just got turned loose here, though. Let's see who they're going after. If you turn your back to the dogs and run from them, they can be pretty damaging. But I almost think they're probably targeting the Cimbri Bowwomen. That's definitely what it's looking like. So the Bowwomen are going to get shredded by War Dogs here. That's not going to be good for the Bowwomen. So yeah, the dogs are out on that flank, and it looks like they are still not released on the other flank. So the Romans being very aggressive, trying to force engagement, pinning down the Wodenaz with the Vigiles, and then backing it up with veteran legionaries. Veteran legionaries would make short work of Wodenaz spears in this grind-out type of fight. Now remember, we have not had any fast charge yet from the general for the Suebi. And nice positioning here with the Scout Riders. They're going to put some javelins into the back of those legionaries. That is going to be brutally painful. And then I see a lot of bow fire and javelins coming in. The Principe here being interrupted by a Spear Levy and then countered by a Bloodsworn. That's a nice play by the Suebi. The dog handlers are going to come in to help that as well. Nice little cheeky charge here with the auxiliary cavalry into the Wolf Warriors. They don't have a lot of armor, so that was, I think, a nice call. There's an Equite just pushing out the Scout Riders right now. Look at this auxiliary cavalry headlong into a Spear Levy, basically absorbing the charge here in the middle. It's countered by the Noble Riders, so it's going to feel some heat there. The dog handlers once again being thrown in just to hold the engagement. And over here, all the javelins have taken their toll on their veteran legionaries, so they're struggling a little bit here. This auxiliary cavalry, though, got 71 kills just annihilating that Wolf Warrior unit. And the Suebi can't afford to take losses like this. Principe coming in to fix the Noble Rider General, and then that Auxiliary Cav swinging around over here, wrapping up into a Bloodsworn. The fast charge got popped, but these units aren't really moving. They do have extra charge bonus at the moment, but I don't know whether they're getting it connected based on what's going on. Look at this Equite just keeping these Scout Riders busy and making them use their ammunition. Another cycle here from an Auxiliary Cavalry. It's going to be a dangerous unit. General and Bodyguard helping out. That Wodenaz Spear held out a surprisingly long time. They are pretty good at, I think, at melee defense, if I remember right. Look at this, the Roman General here getting very gutsy and paying a pretty big price for it. He's probably going to die. But he's tying down the Cimbri Bowwomen. And look at this reserve back here for the Romans. There's quite a few units in reserve. So I'm assuming this is intentional by the Romans to not overcommit their forces. They are still taking some fire on this flank. This Equite actually caught a Scout Rider. It may not win that, but it'll kill a fair number of them, and at least wasted a lot of their ammunition as well. Those Veteran Legionaries are taking some shots. Noble Rider pushed back by the Principes, so the Principes have taken a lot of damage as well. Veteran Legionaries now moving in on some Bloodsworn. They've got 64 kills, which is not a ton for them. Auxiliary Cavalry heading over to support the General and Bodyguard. I'm shocked the General has not died yet. It doesn't look like it, though. But at any moment now, I would expect that General to die. It says casualties sustained. Alright, let's see here. What do we got going on? We got a Principe up here tied up with the Noble Riders, so that's not great for them. A nice counter charge by the Bloodsworn. These units are going to need to cycle charge in order to have any hope of beating that Principe. Bloodsworn and Wolf Warriors both, I think, have pretty good armor-piercing damage. They're just kind of mediocre damage stats because so much of it is armor-piercing. They really rely on that charge because they're just not survivable. The General did die, and that is taking a toll on some of the units. Like over here, that Wolf Warrior led to the fear and did cause that Veteran Legionary to shatter. That's a loss for the Romans indeed. So you can see that when the Romans get into these long, grindy fights, they win against the Suebi. When they get caught up in prolonged missile fire and charges, they lose. And so that's kind of the case here with Rome. For some people, fighting against Rome can be quite daunting, because, I mean, they're like a wall of armor and swords that can sometimes feel a little overwhelming for certain factions. I would say like Arverni would be a faction, for instance, who can stack up a lot of Oathsworn and heavy swords. They can hold their own with the Romans in a toe-to-toe battle. And a lot of factions can if used properly, but again, if the Romans get you into a long grind, it usually does not end well for you, no matter what faction you are, because that's just the kind of thing they excel at. Their modus operandi, so to speak, is heavy infantry and lots of it. And it's not just any heavy infantry, it's really good heavy infantry. Infantry that has a lot of attack, and although they're lacking in that armor piercing, they're going to be doing some damage. They're well shielded as well, I might add, on top of that armor. And some units have even more armor than others as well. I want to say it was Armored Legionaries come with a spectacular amount of armor. Evocati cohort and Veteran Legionaries are more focused on attack. Principe are an earlier unit, so they're just more of a value unit, I think, that were brought here. So trying to get good value without spending too much. And that they are. They're good. They're probably, for their price point, you know, they're probably the best heavy infantry in that price point. It's a close fight here. The Roman infantry is wavering because it's under heavy missile fire from these Cimbri Bowwomen. And they may not be able to survive the day because of it. In fact, the power bar is very much against the Romans at the moment. With these Wolf Warriors in play, it's going to make things tricky because they do scare nearby units. The Romans are also doing some cycle charging, so it would seem. The Auxiliary Cavalry is trying to take on these Germanic Scout Riders. There's a little bit of support coming in from a Principe. Some Noble Riders and Veteran Legionaries in the vicinity. These Veteran Legionaries got a nice counter charge there. And they are putting the hurt on that Bloodsworn. They've got a lot of kills there, 126 and climbing. This Veteran Legionary is at 175. Struggling to put down that Wodenaz Spear, though. Wodenaz Spears are very tough. Not a unit to be underestimated. This Principe unit had come back from routing, and it got charged by the Germanic cavalry here that was out looking for targets. It's a close fight. If the bowwomen run out of ammunition, it's going to get rough. This one still has a few shots, probably. Could be a tough fight anyway. That Woden-ass spear is a good unit, and then the Wolf Warrior causes scare. And remember, the Woden-ass spear, it's got the best AP spear as far as damage goes, so they do cause decent armor piercing against the Romans. That Principe unit's still back there. So we've basically got a Principe and a veteran legionary grinding it out against the Suebi forces. Let's see, what is this? A frenzied charge, I think? Yeah, just frenzy, so they're getting extra charge and weapon damage. We'll see. They're moving in really slow, the Wolf Warriors, but they do cause the scare effect, so let's see if that has any impact on Roman morale. Yeah, the power bar is turning around. I think it's because the ammunition has gone for the Suebi. They got a few kills on the charge, but you can see again, what did I tell you all earlier about the grind? When you end up in a grind with the Romans, it does not end well. That morale, that armor, the survivability, the discipline of the Roman ranks, it comes to play, and it usually plays against you if you're on the other side. So typically with the Romans, you've kind of got to start tearing out a piece of their army and then working your way through the rest, because again, you saw that some of these units were held until late game. A lot of these veteran legionaries, even one of the Principe, I believe, were held until later in the game, where the early engagements went to the cavalry, Vigiles. Just like there was one veteran legionary that got in early. It didn't do well. But holding those units till late in the game, just proved brutally effective. As the Suebi units were tiring out, they were losing support. Eventually ran out of ammunition for the bowwomen. But think about this, though, the war dogs. People always, I've had people ask questions, are the war dogs worth it? Are they any good? Well, think about this. One of these war dogs took out a Cimbri bowwomen. I believe it was this one here, because it went down early. If that bowwomen had been there late in that game, do you think the Romans would have won? If they had gotten to expend their ammunition rather than be chewed up by dogs? Yeah, the Suebi would have won that battle. So the dogs actually were pretty clutch there, and not to be underestimated. So a couple things to keep in mind about the dogs on this game. When they get released at a unit, they kind of just go bananas. They don't stop. They just go for that unit, go for broke. And there are ways that you can guard against it if you see it coming. And it is hard to see because, remember, the unit flag doesn't follow the dogs, and they're smaller and harder to see. They'll run into your skirmisher. You can sometimes run back through a heavier unit to protect yours, and they'll help kill the dogs, but it's tough to notice sometimes. And then the dog handlers can be used for extra charges, flanking penalties, absorbing missile fire, running units off. There's a bunch of use for the dog handlers afterwards. So I would never underestimate the capability of the war dogs when used properly, and here they were very important. So a really fun game there from Sol Invictus and Lone Berserker. I thought it was well played on both sides. The Suebi put some serious hurt on the Romans in several locations there. And, look at this Woden-ass spear here, 125 kills. The other one picked up 115. This Wolf Warrior had 121. That's against Roman troops. That's an impressive showing. So some of these units were getting some kills. The Cimbri bowwomen getting some work done here, 106 kills on both units. Good use of these units. It just wasn't quite enough to tilt them up and over the top. Again, I think if that one more bowwoman would have been kept safe, this swings the other way. So a really close fight and a nice one. Appreciate Sol Invictus sending it over. Hope you all enjoyed it. We'll be having some more action in Rome 2 soon, so keep an eye out for it. HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I'll see you all then.